After more than 100 episodes in French of Entrepreneur, we are really excited to go global. And this time we have a really special guest to kickstart this journey with us. And he's going to share with us his leadership wisdom. So this really special guest is Thomas Zweifel, who is, as we can say, a global performance and leadership expert. And as it is really hard to catch up with your LinkedIn profile and its magnitude, we just want to introduce you as the former CEO of Swiss Consulting Group, which advised a lot of companies and governments around the globe, especially on high performance matters with your special focus on communication. And when you're not actively advising clients, you are also sharing your pair of glasses through your books, your talks and your TED Talks, and also in universities such as Columbia and the University of St. Gallen. And we also have a really fun fact regarding this point.
Yeah, we both followed your course, the Leadership in Action course, and actually Entrepreneur, the podcast, with my catalytic project in the course.
I remember.
So that's where we started to develop this podcast that actually bring us here with you for this interview. So that's a small fun fact to study.
Perfect. It's great what happens out of conversations, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
And to talk about conversation, we both recall that you proposed as a definition of leadership that leadership might be a set of conversations. So my first question would be, are we right now in leadership through these conversations?
Yeah, the short answer is yes. We're definitely, if you want to make something happen, in my definition of leadership, that happens through conversations. And I would even go further and say that all of life is a set of conversations, right? So whatever I say and whatever I hear will become reality. Now that's not the truth. It's not the Bible. It's not proven perhaps scientifically. But I think it's an empowering conversation. Again, it's an empowering concept that whatever I say in language or whatever I hear in language will become reality. And again, it's not the truth, but it's an empowering conversation, an empowering concept. And I'll give you an example. If I say, or if my wife says, I must go to work, then in that sentence, she literally creates a reality. Or if I say I hate Trump or I hate somebody, then that sentence will actually generate a reality. So we have to be very careful about what we say.
Mm-hmm. That's the perfect transition to our actually next question we had planned. Was during the course we both heard of you that you talked about this language that empowers people, as you just said. And what would be more precisely the vocabulary of that language? So how would it be?
Right.
Yeah. How could you describe that kind of language?
Okay. The short answer is I don't know yet, but I have some ideas or some inklings. Again, it would have to be a language that does not create judgments, for example, or that is not past based. In other words, it doesn't lock people in like this person is a jerk, or this person is great, or this person is so and so, or I must go to work, or if I generate in my language, for example, that I'm starving, or I'm dying for a beer, or I'm dying for a break. The word "I'm dying" is about 500 years old, right? So it's a language that's very, very old, from a time when we literally were dying. I mean, we were dying of thirst, and unfortunately, some people in the world still die today of hunger or thirst. But if my daughter says it because she wants a Coke or she wants a glass of water, that's not a language that is really adequate for what we want to do today, right? So I'm searching for that kind of language that really empowers people, that actually gives them access to the future that they want. And that's what I mean by empowerment, right? So what's a language that you and I could use that is actually fact-based, that is future-oriented, that doesn't create a reality that we actually want to get away from. So if I complain, for example, or if I judge somebody, or if I blame somebody, or if I make excuses, because I didn't do the homework because XYZ, that's all past-based conversation. And that's the type of language that I think does not help us now. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like building a new language that is adequate for the 21st century or beyond.
And you can use that through your own conversations with other people, through talks and your books. But how can you try to change that, or like to initiate that change in other people, except like just leading by example? But how can you try to initiate that change?
Well, the first thing I would do is start with myself, to actually see the way I speak and the way I hear what other people say. Is that actually appropriate for what I want to create? Is my language consistent with what I want, or do I shoot myself in the foot with almost every sentence, right? Sabotaging myself. So I would always start with myself before I ask anybody else to change themselves. If I've learned one thing in life, it's that I cannot change another person. I can only change myself, and then maybe share that or assist other people in if they want to change. If they want to create something. If a client of mine says, I have this objective for the company, and then I see that they behave or that their language is inappropriate or inconsistent with what they want to create, then I can say, hey, there's a gap. Do you want to work on this? And then we work on it together. But I would always assume that people are already great the way they are. So it's not like, I have to fix them. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychologist. I'm a coach. I'm a consultant. I'm a board member. So I can basically point out certain things and maybe make suggestions or ask questions. I think questions are always better than answers. So.
And that's the perfect transition to our next question, which is actually about listening, because we both recall that you had a whole Matterhorn of listening in 8 layers. And we were really searching for a way to improve our listening skills, because yes, we do interview people and we do try to listen to them, but we also noticed through your course that we might not listen to them as well as we could be listening to them.
Mm-hmm. And what's the question?
So how can we master this Matterhorn of listening and just climb this ladder in the mastering of listening? Okay,
very good. So I'm not going to go through the 8 layers. People can maybe look that up. But just to say a few. I mean, the basic, the bottom is unfortunately ignoring, right? Which is, I don't hear at all what the person is saying. And to be perfectly honest, I sometimes do that also. It's kind of a human thing that we do that. And then the second level is pretending, where I pretend to listen, but I'm really focused on what I'm going to say, or I'm focused on my phone under the table. I'm sitting in a meeting and I pretend to follow the conversation of the meeting, but I'm really underneath. I'm playing a game or ordering lunch or doing my homework or doing other things. So that those are obviously not very empowering ways of listening. And by the way, I'm glad you're asking this question, because language does not only happen in speaking. We have a kind of a myth or a view of leadership that says that leaders are always talking and they're always on TV and preaching or saying something, and the listening may be a much more powerful aspect of leadership than the speaking even. I could literally destroy somebody by ignoring them. I could destroy a team by pretending to listen, right? Or the third level, if I project onto them, right? I project a certain judgment or bias or a certain prejudice that I have about them from the past. This guy has a mustache, so he must be a terrorist, or this woman is a woman, so she's probably bad at driving, or whatever the things are that I have in my head. If I can become aware of those inappropriate ways of listening, and I think that's my answer to your question, self-observation, right? If I become aware, I pretended just now. My mother was calling and I pretended to listen to her, but I was really just doing my emails while she was talking away. Then by self-observation, I can become aware and say, I was pretending. So how do I want to listen to this person, right? And then I can go to the higher levels, which could be, well, with my mother, I used controlling, which was basically controlling what she can say, you know, by saying, I gotta go, I have to bring Hannah to the kindergarten, or I got work to do, what do you want? You know, so I kind of constrain what she can say. But then I go to the higher levels of listening, like respecting, really listening word for word, or I go to, what's the next one? Empathizing, where I basically listen for, I don't listen to anymore, I listen for the intention of this person, or even generating, where I listen for the greatness, for the leadership, for the brilliance of this person. So again, the first step is self-observation, and then the second step is to choose consciously, deliberately, how would I like to listen? Because for some people it's actually appropriate to maybe control them or not to generate. You can't generate the brilliance of every person, because sometimes people do weird stuff or have a crazy idea that's really not useful, and then you have to ignore it. Or if you get a Viagra ad on the internet, you could ignore that, right? So you don't have to listen to that. You don't have to listen to everything.
And especially, I think, in these digital ages that we are now, we listen to so much stuff, always overwhelmed from all the information we have.
Yeah.
And actually, there was a question we wanted to ask also through communication in the digital age, because you wrote a book called Communicate or Die, which was around the beginning of the 21st century, I think it was published. So before the whole hype of social media. So how do you think now that we have the digital tools to communicate, to listen to everywhere, and to care about everything, how do you make sure that your communication and hence your leadership doesn't get lost actually in the information overload that is our reality actually?
Yeah, very good. So I would say that number one, I'm aware that in social media, a lot of the communication gets lost. Okay, so I'm going to quote a colleague of mine, Albert Mehrabian, who's was at the UCLA, at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles, and he said he did one of the very few quantitative studies of communication, and he found that 93% of the communication are actually lost. Maybe not lost, but they're happening not through the words. Okay, only 7% are the words, and then there's, I think, 55% is the context in which I speak, and the rest, which I think is 37%. I'm not 100%. I'm not a mathematician, but I think 37% are, you know, the tone of voice and the body language and the mimicry. So you and I can see each other right now in this interview, but the people that are listening to the interview might not see all the things. They don't see me smile. They don't see my body language. They don't see how you're listening to me. So they may not actually get the full communication. And that's why via social media, I think it's very, very difficult and dangerous to do certain things. For example, if you want to crack a joke, I would not recommend it via social media, because it's, you know, so much of the meaning gets lost, or the irony gets lost. It's just the words, right? So that could be dangerous. Or if I have an issue with somebody, if I don't know, want to resolve a disagreement or a conflict with somebody, I think it's a very bad medium to use social media for that. So much can escalate, and it can get into World War III instead of actually resolving the issue, for which I think you need at least a telephone call or WhatsApp call, or even better, if you can see each other face to face, and you can see, you're frowning when I say this. Why do you frown? You know, so then I can check on the communication and can make sure that the communication is complete.
That makes me think of the new trend of virtual work, where people just work through cameras, Skype and Zooms from all around the world. Yeah. How do you think that leadership should adapt to this kind of new working style? Because then you would not see, as you just said, the body type, like the body movements of people frowning and so on. You just would communicate through Skype, and even sometimes without video. So a lot of the communication might be lost. How do you think that leadership one or two ways that they should adapt in companies so that virtual work could work.
Yeah. Well, I mean, augmented reality is already better than only podcasts or nothing against podcasts, but than only reading or hearing somebody, right? So virtual reality could actually be helpful for leadership because we're living in a globalized world. There's a lot of virtual teams that are doing work, right, without ever seeing each other or without meeting each other, and so I think virtual reality will be an asset to that you could actually perform an operation. If you're a doctor, you could perform an operation remotely, for example. You could work with other people remotely. I think video conferences, for example, can be a great asset. But to go back to the question of how do we deal with this inundation of information, and how do we select the information that actually works? I do something else also, which is I schedule myself, and I use this methodology that we've learned together called Cockpit, where I put in my calendar very specific time slots where I will expose myself to social media. So, for example, I'm not a slave to Facebook or Instagram or whatever happens on a daily or every second, right? I get messages and stuff, and it's not necessarily on my purpose line. So what I do is I schedule myself once a week, for example, to look at all my Facebook feed and to answer, because I have to be responsive, but I don't have to be enslaved by that. So I put it in time slots where I say, now it's Facebook time, or now it's LinkedIn, and now it's Instagram, or whatever I'm working on. So that's another way of being a little bit more self-determined, I would say, around this whole social media wave.
And talking about work and organizations, we are really interested in your view on high performance, because we are always trying to get some principles that could be applied in different contexts to enhance performance. Mm-hmm. And you work with a lot of high-performing people, but you could make them even more high-performing. That's really interesting to us. And did you see a common pattern or a common denominator between all these high performers that make them performing or performant, but also maybe a common hurdle, something that let's say hindered their performance?
Okay, I think there's two things. With all the people, and I've, as you pointed out, I worked with so many different people with CEOs, with government officials, also with military people, with UN officials, with NGO people, and I think that the one common denominator that I found with the high performing people is that they were what I would call authentic. Authentic meaning they were being themselves. They did not try to be like somebody else. And there's this beautiful quote by a Rabbi Zusha, who said in the 18th century, he said, in the world to come, so in other words, when I die, I will not be asked, why were you not Moses? I will be asked, why were you not Zusha? So the idea is not to be like somebody else, not to even copy somebody like Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or whoever you want to copy. They are doing their job and they have done their job, and your job on this planet is to do something that has never been done before, and to be truly yourself. Now, that's not an easy thing to answer, right? I mean, who am I? What's my purpose in life? But to basically get clearer and clearer, what's the sculpture that's really me? You know, what's the David that's in the block of stone? What's the David that Michelangelo can distinguish? What's not me? Take that away and then reveal really what's me? What's really true to me? What kind of job is true to me? How do I want to work with people? What do I want to accomplish? What kind of legacy do I want to leave behind? And so authenticity is for me the number one thing. And my definition of authenticity is to be authentic or honest about your inauthenticity, which means we lie all over the place. We say, oh yeah, that was a great dinner. that was really nice. And yes, I would love to meet with you. Yeah, we should definitely make an appointment. But then you kind of like leave it behind and hope that the other person won't remind you. Right? So there's this kind of lack of authenticity in a way. And to actually be authentic about your inauthenticity, which means to say when you're lying, to say, yes, I pretend to give advice and be this great guy, but underneath I'm actually lying, or I'm a totally different person. So to actually say that, because we're all inauthentic, we all lie all the time, okay? So to be honest about that for me is the definition of being authentic. And then I think the second thing is, in short, in one word, is integrity, okay? And integrity not as a moral phenomenon, not as, you should have integrity or ethical, you're a better person if you have integrity. Integrity simply as a congruence between what you say and what you do. My example is a bicycle wheel, right? If I have a bicycle wheel that's beautifully designed, according to specifications, where every spike or whatever that's called is in the correct place, if that's the case, then that wheel will perform perfectly, flawlessly. The same with the software. If I design a software and it's perfectly designed according to the specs of the software, then it will perform perfectly and it will not have bugs. And the same is true in our lives, right? If I say one thing and I do that, I will honor my word, then I will be flawlessly designed, or I will perform flawlessly as well, which basically just means I will either keep my word. If I give you my word that we're meeting here at 1 p.m. today to do this, I will be here at 1 p.m. Or if I can't keep my word, because I can't always keep my word, I will still honor my word by saying I can't keep my word. And then I need to deal with the fallout, right? I need to deal with the consequences because people are affected. So this type of integrity of simply living as my word, honoring my word, that I think is absolutely essential to high performance.
And for the more kind of hurdle or obstacle that you could have observed from all these high-performing people, is there one thing that you always talked about in your leadership, in your coaching sessions, or some kind of problem that you always saw?
Yeah, I would say we're talking about leadership here. I would say self-leadership was probably the key obstacle to people, that they were not self-aware. They were flying blind. They were executing the program of somebody else, whether it's their parents or some priest or society, that, you should make a lot of money, otherwise you're nothing, or you have to perform and otherwise you're not going to be loved, or whatever the program is that runs in our brains or in our minds that has been inculcated to us in our childhood by the culture or by the parents or other people of authority, to actually free myself from that, or maybe not even free myself, but at least observe it, at least become aware of it and say, aha, that's the program, that's the software that runs in my brain. And then I can have that software, to talk personally, as you know, I'm running on a software called, we called it the bottle in the class, right? My software is, I have to live for not only for myself but also for my sister, to prove to my parents that they didn't completely fail, because my sister died at the age of 18 from a heroin overdose, right? So to recognize and realize and become aware that is the program that runs. If I can do that, then I will be more self-determined. I will be more leading myself. And I would say that's the biggest obstacle, that leaders that go awry, that go into a bad direction, it's usually because they did not have a full self-awareness. They're not really steering their life. They're not in the cockpit of their life. They're kind of just being tagged along, like the tail of the dog, by some other forces. Mm-hmm. And leadership is first and foremost to lead yourself, to begin with yourself.
And for self-awareness, do you have what do you advise most, like the people that come to you for that have this problem, or even in your own life? How did you do you have some techniques or some things that you used yourself or that you continually use now in your life to refine self-awareness? Because we know it's never like an ending process, it's always a continuing process.
Absolutely.
So
That's
like,
correct.
how do you do that in your own life, or how do you teach that to other people?
Right. So in the beginning, you said, or we said, that life is a conversation, or that leadership is first and foremost a set of conversations. Even this is a conversation, right? So what I would look at is, what are the background conversations that are running my life? If life is really a set of conversations, then these are conversations that lead me to do stuff. And I need to understand what those conversations are. And they're usually not very pretty. I mean, it's not like, well, I got these core values of, I need to make a difference, or I want to help people, or I want to be CEO or whatever. That's in the foreground, right? But there are conversations that are running in the background. And if I can find kind of like the one sentence that runs my life, from the moment I wake up to the even while I'm asleep, it runs my life. If I can reveal that and put that on the table and say, aha, my life is all about, pleasing other people, or making sure that everybody else gets what they need, and I never ask myself what I want, then that's an important realization. Or if my life is, I need to prove to my parents that I'm a good person, or I always feel like I'm being tested and I have to pass the test. Whatever the thing is, or, some client told me she feels that she's always like a guest, and she wants to be a nice guest, right? So, but she never feels at home. It's not, she's never at home in herself. So it's always like, I'm a guest and I have to prove that I'm a good guest. That's a very stressful thing. And again, if I can reveal that program that runs, and as you said, that's a lifelong exploration. I'm still exploring that for myself. I've been doing this for 35, 40 years, and I still haven't found the answer. And it's probably not about finding the answer, but in the process, even just the first step of the initial realization was I need to be the best. That was kind of like what I found out in 1984. I need to be the best. Why? Why do I have to be the best? Why? Better than other people? That makes no sense, right? So the moment I see that, I can then distinguish myself from that, and I am no longer the slave of it. It's not like, oh, that's all reality. Everything I do, I have to be the best. I can step back from that, and then I have that. And I think it still drives some of what I do, but now I have it rather than it has me.
That's really interesting to talk about the last part of our interview about your journey. You use this model and your ongoing reflection to drive your life in a self-determined way, as you just explained. But during this journey, did you have, or could you recall a specific moment that shifted your paradigm, or just a moment that stood out and you want to share?
Yeah, I think it was 9/11, actually. I think that was really a defining moment. And I know it was a defining moment for other people as well, unfortunately. I was actually sitting at the promenade in Brooklyn Heights, which is about 200 meters away from ground zero, where the attacks happened on 9/11. And I saw the first plane fly in, and I thought it was a Cessna. I thought it was some teenager that had hijacked the plane or something and crashed accidentally. And then when the second plane came, and it was banking, which means I saw the underside of the plane. I saw the black underside, and it was a huge passenger plane. And I just knew this is terrorism. I mean, this could not be an innocent accident. And then the building collapsed, and I literally, I started crying, and I couldn't stand anymore because my knees were so weak, and I literally felt like my world was collapsing. And in a deeper sense, I had always thought that every human being has a point, in a way. Every human being has a right to their opinion. But I found in that moment that I don't need to understand every human being. You know, there are some people that are just wanting to destroy stuff or killing people and having a value system of death rather than life. And I don't need to understand that, and I don't need to endorse it. I don't need to be friends with everybody. And so in that moment, I let go of some relationships that were actually not good for me, that I felt like is not authentic for me, not for me anymore. I let go of some work. I became way more focused on what I really want to do, partly because I was in danger. I was not physically in danger, like I would die. I don't think I was thinking about dying. Well, actually I was. I remember that there was some dust coming over from Ground Zero, a lot of dust, a lot of asbestos, or I actually didn't know what it was. And there have been rumors about anthrax or about, maybe some biological warfare, and anything was possible. Right? It could have been that maybe somebody wanted to release a biological agent that would kill all of us. We didn't know in that moment, and there was no radio, there was no TV, there was no telephone. You didn't know what was going on. So I literally had a fear that I would physically die. But then out of that darkness, I became a lot more focused on what do I really want to accomplish in my life, what do I want to leave as a legacy. And then I met somebody on the next day, literally, who came up on the promenade. He was a rabbi, and we actually ended up writing a book together, the rabbi and the CEO, about the Ten Commandments. And this is not so important here, but it became clear to me that I would be myself regardless of the costs, in a way. Even if people didn't like me anymore, or didn't agree with me, or felt I was a jerk or whatever, I was on my path, and I would not be deviated from that path. And I think that was an important moment in my self-determination, or my self-leadership.
That's super powerful. I think you have these kind of moments on one side that can change your paradigm, and then also
Right.
people that you meet, like the rabbi, to the book Rabbi and the CEO that we also read for the course. We can see also how he also got involved into your life and how you could help him. And we were wondering if there were any more external influences that maybe you read of, or maybe you studied a lot, maybe, I don't know, some kind of leader that really inspired you. I know in your TED Talk you talk about the Kennedy and also different others, Gandhi and so on, but is there like one precise one that had a big influence on your life, even if you never really met him or met her?
Well, yeah, I mean, the people that you mentioned were definitely part of that. For me, it's when I read a book, or I watch somebody on TV, or I watch even a series on Netflix or whatever, I always look whether that person could be, in a way, a role model. And for example, Churchill was a major role model for me. I mean, I read all of his biographies and autobiographies, and for me, he was somebody who was willing to really be himself, to stay that course, but to serve, to not reduce my life to getting stuff, but actually to giving, to give to other people, and to make something happen that's much, much larger than me, than my own little body or my own little life, right? And he said once that you make a living by what you get, but you make a life by what you give, right? So that's, for me, that's really, that was powerful. Churchill was not perfect. He had a lot of things that would be terrible today. For example, he called my other hero, Mahatma Ghandi, he called him that little naked man. So that was not a very good thing to say. And I think most leaders today would not get through with that, except Donald Trump again. But Mahatma Ghandi, and maybe I'll tell a quick story that really impacted me. And I think you know this story. Mahatma Ghandi had an ashram, right? He was sitting in his ashram, and he was sitting at the spinning wheel and meditating. And a woman comes with her 8-year-old son to him, and she has to travel several days to get to the ashram, she takes the bus, and then she takes a rickshaw and a train, etc. And she finally stands in front of Mahatma Ghandi. And Mahatma Ghandi says, "What do you want?" And she says, "Tell my son here to stop eating sugar." And Mahatma Ghandi goes, "Please come back in 2 weeks." And she goes, 2 weeks? Okay, it's the Mahatma Ghandi, so I'm not going to question him. So she goes all the way back with her son, the rickshaw, the bus, the train. 2 weeks later, she comes all the way again to the ashram, and he says again, "What do you want?" And she says, "So now, please, could you please finally tell my son to stop eating sugar?" And Gandhi bends down to the 8-year-old boy and says, "Stop eating sugar." And then the woman loses it, right? She says, "Okay, with all due respect, Mahatma Gandhi, I know you're an amazing man, but why didn't you just tell him 2 weeks ago? I had to go all the way back and all that." And he says, 2 weeks ago, I was eating sugar. So, that's again about integrity. He had to basically live consistent with what he was preaching. He had to walk his talk. Otherwise, he had no right to give advice or to say anything. Those are two role models.
That's really interesting. And our last question would be about you studying it all over again. Let's say you were graduating in 2020 and you had to implement your strategy, which you call strategy in action, so catalytic approach and iterative approach. If you had to start all over again now, how would you go about it?
Okay. Well, I think if I started again, I have two answers. The first answer is I would probably study a lot more brain science and neuroscience and this whole idea of how are we programmed, or why do we make systematically bad decisions or biased decisions? Why do we get inundated with the noise and then we don't see the essence in all the noise, right? So that would be something that would fascinate me, and I think it's really important for us as human beings. And this is my colleague Daniel Kahneman, who got the Nobel Prize for economics for this work, and he was the first non-economist to get the Nobel Prize for economics. He was a psychologist, or is a psychologist, still alive. So I would probably focus more on that, even more. I came to that relatively late because it's a very new field in a way. But the other answer I would give you, the second answer, is I would not do anything different. In fact, looking back on my life, I feel like in hindsight, and it's really in hindsight because in the moment it was not perfect, obviously, but looking back, every decision that I made was a kind of an intuitive decision, and I threw myself into stuff not really knowing. I mean, even getting married to my wife, at the time I didn't know whether this was the perfect decision, but in a way I did know. And so to trust your intuition about what's right for you, what's the right way to lead your life, and what's not right for you, what's out of scope for your life. Not because it's bad or wrong, simply it's not you. I think if you do that at every stage, and I think I really did that at every stage. There were some things where I worked for companies 2 or 3 times where I was like, maybe I stayed too long, or maybe I found out that it wasn't really true for me, and then I had to leave again after 2 years or whatever. That can happen, right? But even those times, even those decisions where I could say, well, maybe I shouldn't have done that. No, I should have done that because it was perfect for me to learn something. And I think that's just maybe another principle of leadership, that if you can appreciate certain things, even in your past, even the things that were painful or that were tough, if you can appreciate, or let's say even in the present, if you have a boss and you don't understand why in the world is this boss my boss? If I didn't have that boss, my life would be a lot better. But if I can appreciate something, why is this person in my life? Why are they right now dominating me? Or what could I learn in this moment, right? What could I learn from this relationship? Or what could I learn from this boss? Or what could I learn from this situation? if I can appreciate that, then that will give me power. And then there is no such thing as like going back and doing it differently, because you have the life that you have, and it's beautiful. So, and I hope I'm not sounding too optimistic or too like rosy, because I didn't have an easy life. I mean, I'm still working on some of the stuff that was very tough for me early on. But even those very tough moments, and you know, where for example, in my childhood, where there was kind of a minefield of conflict, and I didn't feel safe at home, and my sister died literally. I mean, I could have died just as easily. I was also in danger. But even those things that look kind of negative in quotes were opportunities for me to become more aware, or to make a vow. I will never communicate like this. I will never communicate like I saw people communicate. I will invent a language that empowers people. I will communicate in a way that actually works, and that creates trust or creates love or whatever. And so I can't distinguish between bad stuff and good stuff. It was all useful for where I am today.
That's an amazing way to end our conversation, I think. We could go on for a whole day, but we also, based on integrity, want to respect your time too.
Right.
And yeah, people can find you everywhere on the internet, but do you have some kind of preferred platform or preferred link that you want to send people to that really enjoyed this episode and want to learn more about you, or even contact you? Or
yeah. Well, the easiest way is, I think, LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is definitely a good place. I also have a page on Facebook, which is called I think it's called Leaders Academy Online, but I'm not 100% sure.
Link in the
episode. Oh, that would be great. And there's two more things. One is there's a course which is called Cockpit. We called it Cockpit. It's a video course that I would invite people to consider. It's basically a system that I use and that you're now using as well, if you're still using it, where I get I get a way to manage my commitments and manage my time in a way that I have power and freedom and peace of mind, instead of stress and anxiety and worries all the time about forgetting stuff. So that system is actually available online, and it's called Cockpit. And the other one is our leadership course, literally in 52 videos. I think it's 52 videos. It's a whole video course, so people don't have to go to St. Gallen, or they don't have to go to Colombia to learn this. It's actually available online, and it's called Power Catalyst. And I forgot where it's available, but I think it's available via the Leaders Academy online.
Okay. Perfect. Then to the audience that really enjoyed this episode, feel free to go check out these resources, and also contact Thomas if you have some questions or additional things they want to know. And yeah, do you have something to add more, Oma?
I think that was the best part of the lecture. That was the really good add-on. That's a little bit exclusive, but we really could synthesize in a higher level that in a, let's say, a classical class setup. So I'm really grateful for your time and insight.
That's great, and I'm grateful to you, because note that it was your question that actually created that last part, and it's your listening. You know, you're listening. For me, that's very generous, and I would assert that a person does not exist only independently. We all exist in relationship, and the way that you listen literally grants my speaking. It literally creates my speaking. Now, obviously, I also have responsibility for what I say, right? But I can only exist in the space that is provided by your listening. So I want to thank you for that. And just as a last note, I forgot to say this, but people should also connect to me on Amazon. Amazon is a great way to see what I do, and I post stuff there. There are videos there. Obviously, the books are there. So I look forward to hearing from everybody.
Perfect. So now you know everything. We can see each other in the next episode next week. And again, thank you so much for your time. And yeah, see you soon.
Thank you.